freedom fighters of the glorious revolution. Toussaint Breda, whose name became the sweet Louverture, knew that he had to train former slaves into the world's best fighting army, or all would face the most terrible retribution. With no backup or support from the Mafa-oppressed Afro world, the glorious freedom fighters of Haiti stood alone. This was the great showdown between the Euro-Napoleon and Toussaint, who the French called the Afro-Napoleon. The glorious freedom fighters took a life and death stand against the mightiest grand armies of the imperial French, English, and Spanish, and won. Flip or flap, nothing can change that fact. In history, their great deed is done. It's done. For over a decade, the great battles continued. It seemed that the great struggle and the long war of attrition would never end. But with each successive victory, the self-esteem and self-confidence and the acquired skills and fighting abilities grew with the glorious freedom fighters. They learned from their trusted intelligence that the Spanish forces in the neighboring Dominican Republic were mobilizing for a surprise attack. They crossed over the border a few hours before dawn to defeat the Spanish and free their slaves. The defeated English, who lost 80,000 men, did choose to leave their Afro troops in Haiti to prevent these veterans returning to old Jamaica with the dreadful news. Today, when we see their strong citadel, we remember not the Alamo, but the glorious freedom fighters whose stories we can now tell. Yes, those brave and wonderful Afro men who served their country so very well not so long ago. The archives showed that Dessalines put many slavers on trial for the murder, rape, mutilation, torture, and other high crimes against enslaved Africans. His great and consistent military victories led the French public to also confess that of the two Napoleons, this Afro one is also best. In preparation for the revolution, all day Dutty Bookman had whipped up the Voodoo Ceremony. In united harmony, all in attendance called upon the God of the Sun, the great African ancestors and their strong spirit guides to help set their African children free. They knew the first plantation that went up in flames would be the start of the revolution to set Haiti free and to remove their humiliation, terror, and shame. Sitting Bull would later organize the Ghost Dance and the Sun Dance. But Bookman organized the Voodoo Dance, with all those attending calling upon the power of God, the great universal creator, to help them to defeat their ruthless oppressors who claim to be Christians. With great expectations, the secret stockpile of weapons continued, with remodels and repairs so fine from enslaved Afro engineers who were also the best at the time. So the hand that set the first farm alight had sent the midnight message that all other plantations would soon be burning that night. Thus, many of the cruel slavers, terrorists, in their cozy beds, their eyes would no longer open, and yet it was the end of a dream. They would not live to see tomorrow, and they would not live to see Haiti set free by the glorious freedom fighters and their glorious revolution. Some of the slavers escaped to the ships anchored in the harbor, but as with their neighbors, the world as they knew it was over. In the heat of the night, and the whole country alike, it was the start of the fight, and the African freedom fighters knew it would be like no other night. This preparation and implementation of the glorious revolution also produced the glorious freedom fighters. With no backup or support from the Afro world, they relied on each other, men, women, boys, and girls. However, many years later, the French were able to seek revenge. In disbelief and denial, the Europeans blamed voodoo, smallpox, the wind and the rain for the defeat of their grand army by brave former slaves. The Western Caucasian rulers then conspired to covertly disempower, undermine, humiliate, and impoverish like a broken stick the world's lone Afro-Republic. It was part of a grand design to maintain oppression and to destroy the inspiration provided to the Afro world by the glorious freedom fighters and their glorious revolution. Then, as in retrospect, it was to prevent a domino effect. With the old victorious generation gone, came a new chance. As the new ones were outmaneuvered through puppet dictators and then forced to pay $21 billion to France. The cost was compensation for the French defeat, shame, and loss. Enduring the blood, sweat, and tears of extreme poverty, the huge extortionate debt was paid within 200 years. This tip and other covert strategies succeeded in transforming one of the world's richest countries into the poorest and most oppressed puppet dictatorship. Gone were the days when the rich and prosperous Afro-Republic used its constitution to help inspire, free, and empower the Afro world. They had heavily financed the revolution of Simon Bolivar, and some of their best generals, veterans, and advisors ensured his victory in the war to free Central and South America. The suppression of these historical facts and the long years of poverty caused by the political oppression by puppet dictators are now coming to an end. It is time for restitution so Haiti can heal, revive, and have fences manned. The long overdue annual world celebration of Haitian independence will be filled with joy, fun, love, and happiness. It is time for the great worldwide Afro celebration of music, songs, and dance, for the great poets and historians to tell of the glorious revolution. Yes, let us be inspired by the glorious freedom fighters and their glorious revolution. Their glorious revolution. In this way, it is done. It's done. The glorious